Hafide. Enon si Michael Luhan Bavako. My name is Michael Luhan Bavako, familiar Cabezas and Bitutug in Guam. I come from the Cabeza and the Bitut families on Guam. I am the curator for the Guam Museum. I am the co-chair for the Decolonization Outreach Group, Independent Guam. I have a podcast that I produce called the Finatsu Podcast. I am a teacher of the language and culture of the Chamorro people in Guam and the Marianas. And it is an honor to be speaking with all of you today about the context in which we live in Guam today. And so across the Pacific, Guam's experience has traditionally been different over the past few centuries than other islands. Guam is one of the oldest islands to be formally colonized by Europeans several centuries ago. And like some of our brethren across the Pacific, we remain in a colonial status up until today. That while many different islands have moved on to a different political status, Guam remains, according to the United Nations, a non-self-governing territory, according to the United States, an unincorporated territory. And so Guam is a place, as you will see from other videos that are shared as part of this peace wave, it is a place in which you can see strongly the nexus of militarization and colonization. It is also a place, though, in which we push further and further, in which we are pushing more and more for there to be a stronger sense of demilitarization and decolonization as well. Not simply out of sort of a desire for justice, a desire to determine our own destiny, but in something which sort of can literally save these islands in an increasingly sort of dangerous world. And so Guam is a strategically valuable place for the United States. It is on the edge of Asia. Militarily, it provides so much value for the United States, simply being quote unquote American real estate on the edge of Asia against potential rivals or competitors for the United States. Guam's value, though, as a military site is enhanced as a colonial site in the sense that when you hear military commanders speak about what makes Guam valuable to U.S. military interests, there's always twofold. There's always two things that are mentioned. One, it is on the edge of Asia. Simply look at a map. Two, compared with other bases in Asia, there is more freedom of movement. There is more strategic flexibility. And so this is where these two things, colonization, militarization, intersect to provide this enhanced value for Guam. As the late Secretary of Defense for the United States, Donald Rumsfeld, said, Guam provides so much. If it did not exist, we would have to create it, invent it. And so this is where we in Guam sit today, as the tip of America's spear. And for us on this island, it is a precarious situation because 1/3 of Guam's 220 or so square miles is US military controlled. We are a unincorporated territory, which means we do not get to vote for president. We do not have electoral college votes. We do not have a voting representative in the US Congress. We do not have a seat at the United Nations. We do not have the ability formally to make partnerships or negotiate with our island neighbors or with countries around us. Our existence is strongly defined by the limits of the federal government and the interests of the US military. And so this is why decolonization and demilitarization are so vital, is that to live on an island on the edge of Asia, filled with US military weapons, hardware, and plans to increase it further, you realize that 1/3 of your island is not under the control of the limited local government, that the resources that are on those bases, whether it be the water in the ground, whether it be sort of the soil, the trees, the medicinal plants, even the historic properties, the bones of our ancestors are not within our control. And then that becomes amplified by the fact that we are a territory in which our voices are not supposed to matter, in which, in strategic military terms, the US military has more power here, less oversight from the federal government in the United States, less democratic oversight, less foreign interference. All of these come together to supercharge the strategic value of Guam. This is why decolonization and demilitarization must go together, because what we see in Guam is a case study in how colonization, how militarization and takes away the basic rights of self-governance, the voice of the people who are affected most dramatically by the placing of bases, by sort of the projection of force, by the testing of weapons, that those who live in those areas, their voices are denied, and that, in the case of Guam, is part of its value. And so as we look across the world, as we look across the Pacific in particular, but we look across the world, we can see that more and more. In some places, it's clear and it's obvious. In other places, it's less pronounced. But there is this important nexus that in terms of broadening democratic freedoms, broadening the actual ability of your average person to have any control over what their country, the direction of their country, you have to combine these things, demilitarization and decolonization. And for us in Guam, it is literally sort of the future. It is our fate, in the sense that as the tip of the spear, the United States makes decisions for us based on the chess game that it is playing with other countries across the Pacific and across Asia and across the world. And we don't get to know what that strategy is. We don't get to decide that strategy. We don't get to decide if we want to opt out. We don't have a say. And so we in Guam stand in solidarity with all others who are in a similar predicament, who want their voices heard, who are shut out from these basic democratic, basic processes of self-governance. And so, I appreciate this opportunity to speak to all of you. Until we see each other again.